These are 10 crazy facts about the ancient world that you won't learn anywhere else. Part 3. Number 10. In Greek mythology, Zeus would often strike mortals with his powerful thunderbolts from the sky. This has led to the popular image of Zeus as the god of thunder, but where did this come from? Well, according to historians, the legend of Zeus's thunderbolts was actually inspired by real-life events. Back in the ancient days, people didn't understand natural phenomena like volcanoes and lightning storms. So they made the gods responsible for them. Since Zeus was the king of the gods, he had to be powerful enough to throw massive bolts of lightning at anyone he pleased. However, recent theories claim that the idea of Zeus's thunderbolts was actually inspired by the sight of volcanoes erupting in places like Italy, Greece, and other Mediterranean countries. Imagine witnessing such a spectacle firsthand without knowing anything about geology. It makes sense why those ancient people would attribute it to their god of the sky. And since then, the myth has continued to live on through stories and pieces of artwork. So next time you hear thunder rumbling in the sky, just remember that according to Greek mythology, Zeus is throwing a tantrum up there somewhere. No, 9. The legendary lost city of Atlantis. When Plato wrote about the city of Atlantis, he claimed it was a place of wisdom and power, but it was eventually destroyed by an earthquake and sank beneath the ocean. He said it was located beyond the Strait of Gibraltar, but modern maps show no evidence of any lost cities around there. So, does this mean Atlantis was just a figment of Plato's imagination? Well, not so fast. According to some historians, Plato could have been describing a real place that once stood where the Strait of Gibraltar is today. About 3,600 years ago, a volcanic eruption wiped out the island of Santorini, leaving only a few small islands behind. Could this be the same place Plato was talking about? There are even some reports suggesting that parts of the island could still be found underwater, proving that the island did sink into the sea as Plato described. But whether or not this really was the legendary Atlantis, we may never know for sure. Number 8. Vampires. You've probably seen your fair share of vampire movies, but what if I told you that vampires might have actually been real? Well, not exactly. According to experts, the vampire myth came about because of certain diseases that people didn't understand back then. For example, people suffering from rabies or porphyria sometimes avoid sunlight and eat raw meat. They also tend to stay away from garlic and make themselves look pale and sick. That last part, avoiding garlic, is probably where the whole garlic repelling vampires thing came from. Now, luckily, we've come a long way in our understanding of medicine. And while we don't have any vampires among us, we do have treatments for these diseases that can help those affected live more normal lives. And if you ever feel like you're turning into a vampire, rest assured, you're probably just getting a bad case of the flu. Number 7, the Trojan horse. The story of the Trojan horse is one of the most famous in history. After the Greeks laid siege to the city of Troy for 10 years, they built a massive wooden horse and left it outside the city walls. The Trojans, believing it to be a gift from the gods, brought the horse inside their city. But it turned out to be a trick, and the Greeks snuck inside and burned the city to the ground. But new findings suggest that the Trojan horse may have been more than just a clever military tactic. Some archaeologists believe that the horse may have actually been a real siege weapon like a battering ram or siege tower. These weapons were used to break down doors and walls, so that soldiers could enter and fight their way to victory. So, if the Trojan horse really was a battering ram, it wouldn't be surprising that the Greeks were able to destroy Troy so easily. Maybe the legend of the Trojan horse got embellished over time, and the original story was more about a clever military tactic than a bunch of sneaky Greeks sneaking into the city unnoticed. No. 6. Dragons. Dragons are mythical creatures that have captured the imaginations of people around the world. From the fire-breathing dragons of European folklore to the water-dwelling dragons of Chinese mythology, dragons have been revered as powerful and mysterious beings throughout history. But what is interesting is that many experts believe that dragon myths may have been inspired by real creatures that existed thousands of years ago. Dinosaurs. Imagine living in a time before science and coming across a dinosaur fossil. You have no way of knowing what it could be. It must have seemed like a real-life dragon. This theory is supported by the fact that many dragon myths have similarities to each other across different cultures. For example, dragons are often described as being huge, scaly, and having sharp teeth and claws, just like dinosaurs. Additionally, many dragon myths include tales of dragons being buried with treasure, which could have been inspired by the discovery of dinosaur bones in areas rich with minerals. No. 5. Medusa. Medusa is a figure in Greek mythology who is often depicted as a monster with the head of a woman and the body of a snake. She is known for her ability to turn people to stone with just one glance. But according to historians, Medusa may have actually been based on a real person. One theory suggests that Medusa represented the dangers that women faced in the ancient world, especially when it came to unwanted male attention. The story goes that Medusa was once a beautiful woman who was cursed by Athena to have snakes for hair and a hideous visage that could turn men to stone. But some believe that this myth was actually a way to scare young men away from women, who were considered too powerful or dangerous. In some versions of the myth, Medusa is actually a protector who wards off unwanted advances, but she's misunderstood and ultimately killed by the hero Perseus. This interpretation of the myth suggests that women were often seen as monsters or witches during the ancient times, simply because they possessed knowledge or abilities that men feared or didn't understand. No. 4. The biblical flood. The story of Noah's Ark is well known around the world. God decides to wipe out humanity because of their evil ways, and he sends a great flood to cover the earth. Only Noah and his family survived the flood because they built an ark and followed God's instructions. But the story doesn't end there. After the flood, God promises to never destroy the earth again, and he creates a rainbow as a symbol of his promise. But the story of Noah's Ark isn't unique to the Bible. In fact, similar stories can be found in many different cultures and religions around the world. This has led some to believe that the Great Flood wasn't just a story, but a real event that happened in history. Scientists believe that the Great Flood myth may have been inspired by a series of catastrophic floods that occurred at the end of the Ice Age about 12,000 years ago. Rising sea levels caused by melting glaciers flooded coastal regions, wiping out entire settlements and forcing survivors further inland. The remnants of these floods could have been passed down through generations, eventually becoming the Great Flood myth we know today? No. 3. Werewolves. Werewolves have captivated the human imagination for centuries. The idea of a human being able to transform into a wolf is both terrifying and fascinating. But according to some experts, the werewolf myth may have been rooted in reality. During the Middle Ages, people began to believe that werewolves were real, and they often blamed these transformations on witches and demons. It wasn't until the 1800s that scientists began to take a more rational approach to the werewolf phenomenon. Researchers studying a rare genetic disorder called hypertrichosis found that it caused people to grow excessive amounts of hair all over their bodies, making them look more like animals than humans. When combined with symptoms of rabies, such as aggression and biting, this condition could have easily led to the myth of the werewolf. Number 2. Sirens. The siren myth may have actually been inspired by real-life dangers along the Mediterranean coast. Sailors would have encountered treacherous waters and rocky cliffs, and they could easily have been lured to their deaths. The sound of the wind whistling through the cliffs and caves could have sounded like the enchanting songs of sirens, and the rocks and whirlpools could have looked like the hands and hair of these mythical creatures. Over time, sailors would have shared stories of these dangerous waters with others, and the myth of the sirens would have grown. As a result, future generations would have been warned of the deadly sirens and the need to avoid the dangerous coastlines. No. 1. Giants. According to Norse mythology, giants were huge creatures that lived all over the earth. They were strong and powerful, and they often fought against the gods. The most famous giant in Norse mythology is Ymir, the frost giant, whose son Thor becomes one of the most powerful gods. But what is interesting is that the stories of giants may have actually been inspired by real creatures that lived on Earth millions of years ago, mammoths. Picture this: someone walking through the forest and coming across a giant tusk lying on the ground, without the knowledge of what a mammoth was. They might have assumed it belonged to a giant, human-like creature that roamed the earth. This theory is supported by the fact that many ancient cultures have stories of giants, and they all seem to describe creatures that are similar to each other. For example, the Bible tells a story of an angel appearing to a man named Enoch and taking him to heaven without him ever dying. Could this story have been inspired by the discovery of a skeleton of a giant, human-like creature that lived millions of years ago? We may never know for sure. But one thing is clear: the world of ancient mythology is full of surprises, and there is still so much we don't know about the past. So keep exploring and learning, and who knows what other secrets you might uncover. Thanks for watching. Do you know any more crazy facts about the ancient world that you'd like to share with the class? Leave them in the comments below and cite your sources. Who knows? You might just be the one to teach us all something new. Thanks for tuning in. See you later.